Welcome back, I'm the Book Guy, and I'm here to help you decide what books you want to read. Today we're looking at the Shattered Seas Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, as part of our monthly theme of January, looking at young adult books. This is a truly unique series. It's a Viking fantasy inspired by Scandinavian culture and mythos. It's a high seas adventure, the world itself is full of secrets, yet most curious of all is its blending of genre. This is a young adult series and a Grimdark series, two things that don't usually go together, but actually work really well together.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
We have a coming-of-age story that's young adult, combined with the harsh realities of life that we see in Grimdark. This series is also a great introduction to the Grimdark genre, so we'll see how Grimdark can shape a story in very interesting ways, even when it's holding back its more violent and graphic aspects. So let's get into this series, we'll see if it's going to be right for you. Prince Yarvi lives in Getland, a proud country of warriors. However, Yarvi was born with a birth defect and only has one functional hand, meaning he can't grip a sword or an axe or a bow properly, so he's considered unfit to be a warrior and a king. Yarvi instead considers himself a scholar, and decides to make his mind his greatest weapon. But when disaster and betrayal strikes, Yarvi is cast adrift into the cruel, uncaring whims of the Shattered Seas. He finds himself among a group of outcasts, but with this motley crew, Yarvi vows to reclaim what was stolen from him. Thus, a quest of vengeance begins. At first glance, this world seems like a fun Viking fantasy, but there is more than meets the eye here. There are secrets in this world hidden just beneath the surface. The peoples here come from Scandinavian culture, with specific countries on the map based off Denmark and Sweden in particular. Think of the Baltic Sea and that part of the world. Though just to be clear, this is not historical fantasy. I know it's based off Viking culture, but it's not set in the 7th to 9th century. It is its own unique fantasy that deviates from history in some very interesting ways. A big mystery in this world is the elves. So everyone knows that elves used to live on the Shattered Seas, but they disappeared a long time ago. No one really knows what happened to them exactly. There are rumors that they fought a war against God himself. There are elven artifacts discovered from time to time, but they're all taboo. You should never touch them. No one really knows what they are or what they do. There are even certain elven places left on the world, but they're now illegal to visit. So this is a great secret you're going to want to know more about. This world also has pretty much no magic. This is very similar to Abercrombie's First Law series. He likes to write fantasy that focuses more on what humans can normally do, so no magic. Although, there is a myth that the elves took all of their magic with them. And there's a myth that certain witches who defy the law of the church can use arcane arts. But that's all hearsay, I'm sure. This trilogy has a rare structure that we don't see too often. So Yarvi is the protagonist of Book 1, and that is his story. But Book 2 introduces new protagonists. We see our character Thorn, the woman in the front and center, and then the big muscly Brand to her right. Yarvi from Book 1 is up the back there, so he's still around, but takes on a different role in this story, more looming large in the background. Book 3 does this again, introducing Princess Skara, and balancing her and incorporating her with Yarvi from Book 1 and Thorn and Brand from Book 2. Now we see this structure used from time to time in the YA genre, like with the Lunar Chronicles and the Illuminae files, where each book adds a new protagonist. It can be a very clever way to shake up the dynamic of each book and keep the overall series interesting. But one major drawback is that can also prevent us from going deeper with our existing characters. So some critics have said that Abercrombie's character work is much better in his First Law trilogy. But I think it's more of a case that in that trilogy, we stay with those characters longer and go deeper because they simply get more screen time. Anyway, because of this structure, I'm going to give you an overview of each book on its own and its prospective protagonist. This will be spoiler-free, of course, but I want to give you an idea of where the series goes. In Half a King, Yavi has his throne stolen from him because his disability is seen as a weakness and a liability. So he's on a vengeance quest to claim back his crown. Yavi reminds me a lot of Tyrion from Game of Thrones. He's someone who's more or less incapable of fighting physically. So he has to use his wits, his gold, and the people around him to achieve his goals. Yavi has to learn the strengths, weaknesses, and risks of every person he encounters so he can guide them to support his cause. Yavi's character is all about finding his bravery and his ruthlessness too. This book has a hint of romance, though the question is it genuine? Or just another opportunity for Yavi to use people for his own ends? I also like that Yavi isn't on a journey of self-discovery as he learns to accept his disability. For him, it's not an issue. He doesn't care about it. It's everyone else who has a problem with it.
I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me.
There are some excellent side characters in Book 1, though it is sad we get precious little time with them. Abercrombie has a real gift for great character writing. It's one of the things I love about him so much. He makes his side characters unique in a very short amount of time. Though I think for this series being so short, it often can leave us frustrated and wanting more from these intriguing side characters. Now, in Half the World, our two new protagonists are both failed warriors. Thorn and Bran are highly trained fighters, with Thorn being a damn prodigy, and Bran having Herculean strength. Except Thorn is manipulated into failing her training, pretty much just because she's a woman.
Why am I not surprised?
And Bran fails because he refuses to kill anyone. Is he too soft, or is he a coward? Not to worry. Yavi has a job for both of them. The mighty High King of Throvenland is trying to lay claim to all the kingdoms in the Shattered Seas. Yavi is planning a series of diplomatic missions to all the neighboring countries to unite them in resistance. Now Thorn and Bran begin a series of quests to opposite ends of the world to find allies in the coming war. Little do they know of the nest of schemes and betrayals waiting for them. So Book 2 keeps with the theme of quest and adventure that we had in Book 1. Though Thorn and Bran are very different protagonists to Yavi, being decidedly more active and involved in a physical sense. It's a great way to distinguish them. Thorn in particular is almost bloodthirsty, though Bran is conflict averse, almost like a Bruce Banner type. And yes, there is also a hint of romance. This book has the highest rating on Goodreads out of the 3 books in the series. Why is that? Yeah, we'll come back to that. In the third book, Half a War, war has broken out, and that is not a spoiler, it's in the title. Princess Skara has her realm stolen from her by the High King, so she joins with Yavi in the war to claim back her territory. Now yes, there is deliberate symmetry here between her story and Yavi's. Both are trying to reclaim their throne, but they're gonna do it differently.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Everything comes to a head in this book. Also, Princess Skara is unique out of the protagonists of this world. Most of the characters have some degree of moral ambiguity. In this grimdark world, they're either liars or murderers or cowards. Skara, however, is probably the most noble, righteous, and idealistic character of all. She will stop at nothing to fight for truth and justice. She's a total Girl Scout. She'll have many readers crying out, "Finally, a pure good person!" And other readers will roll their eyes at her. Personally, I adored the dynamic contrast between her and the others. The third book has the most action scenes and the highest stakes. All character arcs culminate here, for better or worse. However, this book has probably got the most divided response from the readers. Why? Well, to explain that, let's finally dive into the whole mechanics of genre at play here. So this series has many of the trademarks of young adult fantasy that we have been discussing in our monthly theme of young adult books. We have young protagonists, coming of age, self-discovery and identity, relationships, questioning the world, questioning authority, and the growing awareness of social issues, etc. Where does Grimdark come into it? What is Grimdark exactly? Well, total honesty here. I wrote a definition for Grimdark in one of my earliest videos on this channel nearly 2 years ago, and all this time later I can barely improve on it, so I'm kinda copy-pasting a script from a little while ago. I know, I'm a hack.
He's a has-been.
Anyway, Grimdark, yes, does have a reputation for violence and brutality, and that is kind of deserved. But none of that is in this series, because it's young adult. And yet it's still grimdark because grimdark is never just about violence. It never was. So here's a little overview of what makes grimdark so special and what you can expect from it in the genre and in Shattered Seas in particular. Number 1, realism. This genre has zero Hollywood or Bollywood gloss. These stories are more like what you would read in a history book. Real history is often chaotic and violent, and the good guys don't always win. Wars are almost never fought between good and evil, but just between sides. Number 2, life is unfair. Sometimes it can be almost cruel to our heroes, as Picard wisely says.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose.
Grimdark often confronts us with the unfairness of life. Number 3, anticlimax. Instead of a long, drawn-out, high-stakes fight, sometimes fights end with shocking suddenness. The power of anticlimax is there to remind you that no one is safe. It may take all the tension out of a present scene to end it so quickly, but it also makes every other scene more tense, because you never know when anticlimax will strike again. Number 4, character arcs don't always end well. Some characters will grow and become better people, as we normally expect to see in a story. Yet, some characters will experience reverse character arcs and change from good people to bad. And still others will try to grow, but fail, and end up staying exactly where they were. This is just like people in real life. We all love the idea of trying to grow into better versions of ourselves, but how many of us have parents who never went to therapy and became emotionally healthy? Not everyone changes for the good, sadly. We see that all the time in Grimdark. This is perhaps the best part of the genre. People act like people. As a tangent though, I want to emphasize that yes, there are still those few characters who do succeed in becoming better people by the end. It does happen, and those are even more triumphant because of how difficult it was, and how easily it could have gone bad. In a world of darkness, the light is even brighter, and it's truly beautiful. Moving on, number 5, plotlines may not end in success. Failure can and will happen to any plotline. Sometimes the heroes can fight, and the bad guys are still overwhelming, or there's betrayal, or just bad luck. Good guys don't always win. This makes every action scene unbelievably tense, because there's real risk of failure. Also because number 6, no one's survival is guaranteed. Even among main protagonists, no one's arc is destined to be complete. Number 7, sex is not glamorous. In film and romance, and especially erotic fiction, sex is always amazing. Everyone has perfect bodies, perfect performance, and compatibility. In reality, sex can be messy and unflattering. There can be poor performance or compatibility issues, or it just inglorious animalistic desires. I could go on. The point is, that's how sex is depicted in Grimdark. Just reality. And I would argue that that's probably healthier anyway. And yes, there are 2 instances of sex in this series, although it's not too explicit and slightly off-screen. Finally, number 8, fights are very messy. Normally we see fights that are stylistic and cool and badass, but also kind of neat and tidy. But have you ever seen a street fight in real life? People just go for it. They punch and kick and shove, and it looks random and clumsy and awkward. This goes to a whole nother level when depicting battles. Grimdark doesn't do Top Gun, cool action scenes. It does, all quiet on the Western Front, horror scenes. There's no glorification of war or military propaganda going on here. War is the worst, and I, for one, like it being depicted as such. But okay, that is my definition of Grimdark, and as you can see, it's not really about violence and gore. It's a much more unflattering depiction of the harsh realities of life. So, how does all that in Grimdark fit in with YA in this series? Well, it's all about that buzz term, subverting expectations. The term Subverting Expectations entered the public conscious after The Last Jedi, which infamously focused all its efforts on surprising its audience and doing the unexpected. Not everyone liked that. I would argue that The Shattered Seas is all about subverting expectations of the young adult genre. However, Abercrombie does this significantly better than Rian Johnson. If you look at The Last Jedi, every single time the audience thought they knew what was going to happen, the opposite happened. It didn't happen occasionally, it happened 100% of the time, which is a bit of a clumsy use of overkill. Abercrombie chills out a little bit about this. He surprises you sometimes, but not all the time, and not to extremes. Therefore, this creates proper tension and uncertainty, where you don't know if things will actually go according to plan, or wildly off plan, or maybe just slightly wrong. The Last Jedi, and speaking bluntly here, it went to extreme lengths to punish its audience for liking Star Wars. The dashing rogue is now an idiot. The idealistic hero has now given up. Even heroic sacrifices are undermined. The audience is punished for being naive. Abercrombie is a fair bit more compassionate towards his readers. Yes, the Grimdark author is quite sweet about it. There are times when this story, yes, challenges the naivety of youth, but we also see how the characters struggle to accept it. There is a cost. It's hard for them. There are morally grey characters, but we also have morally good characters who offer opposing opinions and acknowledge what the audience might be feeling. It's not quite as black and white with expectations telling the audience what it needs to believe, but instead it offers multiple viewpoints. So when Abercrombie subverts the young adult expectations, it may frustrate some readers and leave them feeling disappointed, but it's still a more balanced way to do it. Not too much, not too little, the Goldilocks just right amount. In short, he's not writing these books to prove how stupid young adult books are. He's doing it to present an alternative. That maybe young adults should deal a bit more honestly with the harshness of life. Rather than making an anti-young adult book, he's made them differently, perhaps more maturely. Abercrombie always has tons of representation in his books, but then so naturally included. He doesn't make a big deal out of it, and he's not performative, which I appreciate. There's lots of women. It's not 50-50 among side characters, because this is still quite a male-dominated world, but it is 50-50 among the protagonists. Thorn is a great example of a badass female warrior who still has problems, so she's never becomes an invincible Mary Sue. Princess Skara is a natural-born leader. So it's not about them being strong, it's about them being competent. There's lots of different races on these Shattered Seas, and plenty of people of color. Now, some people might say, hey, it's a Scandinavian part of the world, so everyone should be white. First of all, shut up. Second of all, many people of color are immigrants here from distant lands, just like there were in history. Also, there's great disability rep in Yavi. As I said earlier, I like that his entire character is not focused on his disability or self-acceptance, rather on overcoming people's prejudice of him. There's not much LGBT here, though there are a few one-line references here and there to same-sex flirting or orientation, nothing more overt than that. There's a pretty modest content warning here. It may not be too graphic or intense, but there's still violence and death. There's a lot of adult themes, there's slavery, and some grim depictions of imprisonment. There are some sexual references. One character overhears other characters having sex, although it's not depicted on the page. I don't think this is a real child-friendly series, but it never goes so far as to become purely adult. Definitely mature young adult. Is the ending worth it? Okay, this is the biggest question of the day, and I don't want to spoil the ending, but I need to set your expectations correctly. You see, if you look at these books on Goodreads, everyone loves book 2. That's when they're really getting into the series. Book 3 is a noticeable step down. This has a divisive ending. For 2 reasons, sorry, keeping it vague. There is a little bit of anticlimax. It's done in deliberate grimdark fashion, and it's on theme, but it can be frustrating. And number 2, it's not happily ever after. Now, it is kind of crazy to me that so many people seem to expect a happily ever after, especially considering that the series has never been subtle about its grimdark nature. So hypothetically, if the series had started on a really strong, optimistic tone,
Going on an adventure!
but then suddenly confronted you with horror, then yeah, a grim ending would have been frustrating and out of the blue. But the book is clearly grimdark from the beginning, so it would have been weird to have a perfect ending after that. But speaking vaguely, it's not a Star Wars, they're having a party, everyone's happy at the end, but it's not like The Mist with an infamously miserable ending. So it's somewhere in the middle. You have been warned, only you can decide if this intrigues you. And how much should you try? Well, I think the first book is strong and a great way to tell if you like the series, though many people consider the second book to be the strongest in the series. Either way, give it a try. See what you think of young adult crossed with grimdark, and I hope it gives you an enjoyable reading experience. So good luck and happy reading. So that's all for the Shattered Seas. Next week we're discussing the Illuminae files to finish off our monthly theme of young adult books. After that, we're going to do some deep dives into Malazan. We're going to be doing some deep dives into all the extended Malazan works out there. So if young adult's not your thing, stick around if you like some more complex epic fantasy. If you don't think today's series was right for you, then check out one of my other videos. I'm sure we'll find a good book recommendation that'll suit you just right. You may even want to check out my own books, The Immortal Investigations, which are now available as ebook and physical book. And the audiobook is in production as we speak. If you appreciate what I do, please leave a comment on the Shattered Seas, or tell me what other series you'd like to see me talk about. Check out my shop and my Patreon or my books. Otherwise, I will see you next week. I'll have another book recommendation for you, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!